Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending our webinar today. We're excited to be with you to talk about what's driving compensation and how to manage strategically in a highly competitive market that still continues to be challenging. You've got three people with you today. I am Rena Summersan. I'm the leader of the compensation consulting practice at Newport. We're an Ascensus company. And I'm very pleased to be with you, coming to you today from Cleveland, Ohio. I live out of in Milwaukee, but today was a travel day, so I've got some lake effect snow behind me. I don't know if you can see that. I'm pleased to be joined by Kevin Paulson. He's a principal with our practice, one of our co-leaders here. And Kevin, say hi, and where are you out of? Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, good morning, everyone. Kevin Paulson from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Thank you.
Yeah, Kevin. And I'm also joined by another leader in our practice, the principal, Carrie Arnold. Carrie, tell everybody where you're out of.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carrie Arnold. I'm out of Richmond, Virginia area, so I'm out here on the East Coast.
Great, great. And we'll be popping on and off cameras as we go through the webinar here. So let's go ahead and talk about how to participate in today's webinar. Many of you put in questions up ahead of time, and you can, throughout the webinar, definitely listen through computer audio or use the phone call to dial in and use the information provided. If you've got some delays, any internet issues, go ahead and turn off the speakers' webcams to improve your bandwidth. And if you want to ask questions throughout the presentation, we have your questions that you submitted ahead of time, but go ahead and use that questions pane. We've got our team monitoring that, and they'll bubble up any questions that are coming through that we can answer that apply to the topics we're talking about. There are handouts in the handouts pane. Don't forget to get those off. And please do complete the survey at the end. That helps us to make sure we're getting you the events you want to hear. And there will be a recording of the webinar in the days ahead. So if you wanted SHRM or HRCI credits, please stay through to the end of the webinar, and there will be a poll question that you just say yes or no, and we'll email you the certificate with everything you need to get that research credit. So what are we going to talk about today? How is compensation really one of those key tools in your toolkit to help support your attraction, retention, and motivation efforts? You know, compensation is a big picture item. We've chosen to focus on 6 areas today. The whole part about inflation and salary increases and communication of that, it's a tricky one these days. How about recognition with your high performers, with merit pay, with market increases? And then different retention strategies using short-term or long-term incentives. We're going to also cover remote work or flexible schedules and where that is today, as well as pay transparency, a thorny issue, and the broader total rewards package and all the unique benefits that are happening in the marketplace. We're going to start out, I'm sorry, here with a poll question. And in this poll question, we're thinking about retention, which is one of those big picture items. What are you experiencing now? Are you having difficulty retaining frontline or production employees? Are you having difficulty retaining professional employees, IT, finance, nursing? Are you having difficulty retaining maybe both types, everybody? Or the last one, have you been able to hire and retain a little more comfortably as of late? Go ahead and put in your comment there, and then we will close the poll, look at the answers here for a moment. Look at that. I was hoping you'd all be more having a better time as of late, but nope, still a lot of challenges with frontline employees and both types of employees. It's pretty neck and neck. Professional seems to be sort of the easiest bucket, if you will. So thank you. We can close the poll and kind of get back to our deck here. So yes, it's a tight labor market, and you all just reaffirmed that. At any one point in time, I've seen different studies, anywhere from 40 to 50, 52% of your employees might be actively looking at any one time. And why are they looking? Interestingly, a Society for Human Resources Management survey came out and said, boy, it's number one is compensation, number two is greater flexibility and work-life balance, and number three is better benefits. Never before has compensation taken the first slot. Interestingly, it's always been about the number one reason that people would leave an organization was they wanted a better boss. They just couldn't get along, or they didn't like the culture. Those were the number one and two types of reasons people would leave. But it's really changed with this tighter labor market. So disengagement, we had a lot of burnout. We're still feeling that. People not really able to get the promotions they want. And then just early retirements, we had a lot of that. I'm often asked, well, what can we do in the face of this? It's about engagement, folks. Even though the 1, 2, and 3 used to be about engagement and a better relationship and things like that, it's still the name of the game. Comp might be the reason people are getting swayed, but if it's a bad environment on top of compensation issues, they're definitely leaving. So having a great environment, good recognition for your top performers for sure, and recognition and being able to say, we listen to our employees. A great idea is to do stay interviews and to consider how inflation is affecting people, because inflation has been a big nightly news item. So everyone has that on their mind. We'll talk about that in a second. Doing things like sign-on bonuses, retention bonuses, referral bonuses. I saw a sign-on in healthcare that was upwards of $35,000 for a nurse. I had a law firm saying, we'll give $100,000 to a lawyer. And then just jobs, entry-level jobs, having $500, $1,000, $2,000 sign-on bonuses. And retention can be a great one too. Not only in a mergers and acquisitions situation, but doing a retention bonus to keep people through a tight time where you know you don't want that turnover. Referral bonuses, a good idea in a referral bonus might be, yeah, once we hire a person, but maybe you need to even incent getting the right bodies in the door to interview. I have a client who gives a steak dinner for 2 if you bring me somebody whose qualifications fit the bill on the job ad. So lots of different things that you can do there. So we're going to look at this big picture question, which is, how do you talk about salary increases when all your employees really want to talk about is inflation? We got a lot going on the slide, so I'm going to walk you through it here. First of all, it's cost of living versus cost of labor. And cost of living is what they want to talk about, but you, my friends, are all about the cost of labor. And so we're going to use this graph on the bottom to look at where that is. And the real wage conversation, they're doing some simple math. Inflation, that is the gray line, very faint gray, and you see it going along under the 4% line all the way until, boom, it hops up. We got all the way up to 9%. Now we're down to 7%. I had a lot of questions as people were signing up for the webinar about, well, what is the forecast for 2023? Please tell us that. It's right there in the graph. It says the forecast for 2023, only 4.2, folks. So at 4.2, your employees are doing some basic math and they're going, wait a minute, the nightly news is telling me we've got 7% inflation. How is it that you're only giving me a 4% raise? So the key here is to process this graph with everybody. They're not necessarily going to like the answer. But if we look at what has been happening, the black line here is unemployment. And unemployment, as it bops around, it goes up in a recession, and then it drops down in good times. And if you look at where that is, it's back down to the best of times. We are at very, very low unemployment. CPI flipped, right? The cost of that basket of goods is flipped. The blue line on here is what do you do for your salary budget? That's that 4%. And as you can see, it had been 4% before 2008. Then we had the Great Recession. Boom, it dropped. It stabilized at 3%. And for a long time, it was at 3%. Where was the gray line when we were doing 3% increases? Look closely at that faint gray line, way below. For the most of time, The gray line has been below what we've been doing for salary increases. So we have protected people. When inflation was low, we didn't take money away. But your people here, just the 7.1, we have to remind them that that's cost of living, and people make choices on their basket of goods. They don't necessarily all get affected by inflation the exact same way. No question about it, we're all buying eggs and those are off the charts right now. So we're all feeling that. But you know, there are choices we can make. And what we have to remind people is cost of living bounces around frenetically, up and down, and very sensitive to demand and supply issues, supply chain issues, marketplace. Whereas cost of labor, it's like a cruise ship. Cruises along steady. You have to, as an organization, budget well and ahead of time. And a 1 or a 2% increase to your bottom line costs is a lot. And so we can't necessarily really move as fast as we'd like to. Now, what's happening in the tech industry, for example? We're seeing and hearing a lot about job losses, great job losses. Well, that's an industry that went ahead and they were the ones who helped us get remote in the first place. So they hired like crazy. They brought people on. They gave huge increases. And now at the sign of a downturn, they're letting people go. I think it's actually something that you can use and say, look, we have to be judicious. We have to think about the cost of labor and adjust ourselves to cost of labor as we move, as opposed to just cost of living, because if we aren't careful, we might have to, we might overspend and overshoot the market and have to do layoffs. So, you know, that's an interesting one. Excuse me. Okay, so I see a question in here, and it has to do with where does the recession fit in the bigger picture? Kind of like what I was talking about, we're seeing that slowing in the marketplace. Well, recession, you know, most recessions in history have been accompanied by huge job losses and great unemployment rate, great high unemployment rates. So I really do think that this is a very unique time, and we might actually have a jobful recession as opposed to a jobless recession. And why? Number one, unemployment rate. We talked about that. That's that black line. Number two, wages are still rising. You know, that 4.2 is still a rate. And the other thing, folks, is, boy, we have got crazy demographics going against us. The growth in working age people is much slower than our retirement age bucket. And those early retirement folks are not coming back. They left the workforce. They are not coming back. Add into that, we have way fewer immigrants, and we have a recipe for a demographic problem that's going to continue. So I think that typically slower domestic demand means businesses cut back and they lay off people. But this time, they might rescind their job ads, take those down. They might try to cut costs elsewhere. They might put people on furloughs with benefits. We might see more job sharing, but I really don't think they're going to let go of people they struggled so hard to actually attract and hire in this last 2 years. I think they're going to try to hold on to him. So it may be a recession where instead of having so many employees hurt by layoffs, we might escape that surge in unemployment. So that was your macro econ for the day. And I'm going to transfer now over to Kevin Paulson and let him get down to the nitty gritty of how to make sure you're really paying people fairly and rewarding them. So let me advance the slide here for you, Kevin.
Thank you, Rena. Good afternoon, everyone. And Rena set a wonderful stage for getting into this right here of talking about market adjustments versus merit adjustments, and two components that we wanted to bring to you today. And when you think about this puzzle of what should you pay for a particular employee or for a certain job, and trying to make sure you're competitive, and all those forces that are causing employees to either think about whether they join you, thinking about whether or not they should entertain a phone call from some other situation or apply for another job. Let's start with the left side. We call these market adjustments. And when you look at this over in the green section, it mentions there, this is job focused. And this would be the place we would suggest that you start in determining whether or not you put yourself in a positive position. And this has been as challenging as anything these past couple of years, and having been in this field for a long, long time, actually over a couple of decades now of doing this sort of work, it was, from the vantage point of at least my perspective, as tumultuous and challenging as it ever was during that time frame. And a lot of the points that even got brought out on the poll question previously, that there's this challenge with the production employees and making sure that you can find those sorts of people to be able to fill those positions, has maybe lessened a little bit. That might be a bit lower number this year than it was last year, but still, to the point at the bottom of the page on the left side, it says frequently seen the $2 to $3 to even $4 an hour immediate adjustments, unprecedented. Something we've never seen, and we're still working through that. I would have told you today that at least is lessened, and we believe that it has actually probably softened a bit, where some of those dramatic changes have not had to take place in the past year. But even yesterday, Walmart came out, said, we're going to pick it up $2 an hour. We're going to need to do this, compete. We can't find the talent. Obviously, they're major retailer, and in pretty much any community, probably anyone in this phone call is coming from. So big challenge is still there in the market adjustment. Can I take you to the right side of the page now and have you start thinking about merit adjustments? At the same time, we don't want you to forget about the person, and making sure that you have those pieces in place so that they know if they're contributing, they're bringing you value in whatever fashion that might be. It might be sales, it might be training, it might be the value they bring in just institutional know-how, whatever it happens to be. Let's not let that slide. Let's not let that not be valued in what you pay them. So at the same time, this needs to be looked at, possibly linked to some sort of a matrix situation. Thinking about your overall merit budget, let's head to a poll. I want to ask you this question. I think this is going to be quite helpful for all of you on the call to be able to see this very key question of what steps those of you on the call, but also just other employers, have done with their budgets in 2023. Likely everyone has already done this, so this is why it's going to be particularly informative, because you probably just either implemented or will be implemented in the next month or two. So what direction have you taken with your merit budget increase percentage for 2023? Would it be you made a little bit lower? You either circumstances telling you that, maybe economic conditions, maybe you just believing you can make a little bit less into this year than it was the previous year. In the middle, same number as you took in 2022. It was, just to throw a number, it was 4% last year, 4% this year, same increase percentage for merit. Or would it be the bottom, more than your average percent increase for 2022? Did you believe you needed to take a little bigger step? You needed to make up some ground, maybe a place you possibly fell behind last year? Let's see what numbers that we're showing there and what people thought they had to do. Boy, once again, kind of a split across the board on this, but a couple interesting takeaways. One in particular on this that I would like you to maybe think about as you're contemplating what steps you took in 2023. Still almost half of you, same amount as 2022, but the higher percentage in that bottom slot with that answer of more in 2023 as opposed to what you did last year, more of you feeling the need to make it a little bit higher than it was last year, but still across the board, fairly even split. Thank you. Let's we can head into the next slide, and just kind of some last thoughts around this merit adjustment and then trying to help you feel comfortable with what this amount be. A question we're posed many times in our consulting is group of how much different should it really be? How much more should we make it for those employees that are performing well or bringing us, again, this extra value, contribution, results, performance, however you want to frame it? How much more should it be than, say, the average increase? There is no doubt, as a couple of these top points make there, the most attractive employees, we can't ignore it all the way around. It's true for every single one of us on the call. The ones that you most want to retain are likely the same ones that others want to get a hold of. They want to be able to have those also join your group because they're top performers. So how much more could that be? Should that be? Would you want to be thinking about? Well, the fourth bullet on this page mentions a big association, kind of the overarching comp association in this country, World at Work, does surveys on this. They monitor that every year and ask big organizations in particular, but all sizes of organizations are a part of this survey to share how much more were those increases for top performers versus the average. Is it slightly more? Is it a lot more? They find about 1.4 times. Now, for just your reference point, that has not changed much, and that has stayed pretty common. What we would suggest to you is think bigger. Think beyond that. That is not, in most cases, enough separation to have those top performers, those really talented employees for you feeling like they're getting noticed to maybe the way they should through their compensation. We challenge you with that last bullet point on there. Can it be 2? Can it be higher? Can it be more substantive? Look to that being, if your average increase, just to put it in a percentage standpoint, if it's 4% for your group, we'd suggest you make it 8 for those top performers and try to make that happen in your merit matrix.
Kevin, that's great. We had a question come in that applied sort of to this, doing more, a little bit more in 2023. What are you seeing for the rest of the year if someone is doing a rate increase? They say, what should I consider mid-year adjustments?
Oh, fascinating question. One that I had not touched upon, but absolutely, our group saw, again, kind of an unprecedented sort of practice that organizations took back in 2022, where they did mid-year adjustments where they felt like we're just not keeping up and we're just not able to get there. And in fact, we even saw in the facts and the data, for those of you on the call, we did this large-scale survey all across the country, all kinds of industries, so this crossed all boundaries. About a third of organizations did a mid-year adjustment last year. So now, kind of to the question that a participant had, is that this year we think, just with circumstances and kind of with some of the unknowns with inflation, some of the unknowns with the economy, unemployment kind of still hovering similar, but maybe if anything will be getting a little bit looser there. We think you can probably hang tight for a little while, but also at the same time observe, maybe touch base with your consulting or your, the whoever you work with, third party you might work with on that. But we think it's likely you can probably just kind of observe and kind of see where this goes maybe in the next 3 to 4 months with the general economic conditions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so you've been talking about merit and market adjustments. I'm going to, those are all on the base pay side. Just this definition slide is always good to remember that we have a lot of tools in our toolkit around base pay and merit and market adjustments, but I don't want you to forget, especially in times of economic uncertainty, to have good variable pay programs. And so base plus annual incentives is your total cash. That's the 1-year time frame, looking at different incentive programs or bonuses. I use the words differently. A bonus is more of an after the fact, thank you, here's some money. But an incentive is really said, here, if this happens, here's what we can give you. And so doing that 1-year time frame, and then maybe for that executive team, having them think, how can I shepherd us through? What is a 2-year or a 3-year goal for this organization? And can I really put that total direct package out so that we get that employee ownership mindset. And probably one of the most common executive comp projects we're doing lately is taking a long-term incentive that was like, oh, in 10 years, we'll give you this, or 20 years, we'll give you that, and pulling them back to 3 and 5 years, because folks are just not waiting that long for payouts in this marketplace. So we help organizations, and we're kind of saying, okay, well, if it's time for an incentive, which incentive is right for you? Should it be a short-term incentive? Should it be a long-term incentive? We had a client who just recently did a very big strategic planning session with a partner of ours. And that strategic planning exercise gave them a lot of goals for the year and a couple of 3 and 5 year goals. So we were able to layer in the short term tying to the strategic plan and the long term to tie to the strategic plan for that executive team. If you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, we have a lot of for-profit, even not-for-profit clients digging in deeper and finding out that incentives used to be a 4-letter word. That no, we can't just expect people to work for the mission. We do have to be competitive. If you're a for-profit, do you want to grant equity or not? Many of our privately held clients don't want to grant actual equity. Our private equity clients are very much into real equity, but pseudo equity has become the way of, with phantom stock or stock appreciation rights or performance units plans, to make your executive team feel like, just like a stock option plan would, like you're in a publicly traded company. Think like an owner, act like an owner, think that longer term. I had 2 people in Cleveland this morning in the room. A CEO was saying, I'm looking to sort of pull back a little bit. I want to really have my next level of leadership really grow this organization, but I want to see what they can do. And then another one saying, no, we just did strategic planning. I know exactly what we need to do. Here's what it needs to be. Well, the first one is a perfect candidate for a phantom stock plan, and the second one is a perfect candidate for a PUP plan, a performance unit plan. Now, if you're a nonprofit, our nonprofits are saying, okay, do I want to do that kind of goal-based thing, or do I really want retirement? And you can use both. I've been able to help some organizations with long-term incentives, but on the retirement side, you're a little bit, more structured. You have to do the 457B or maybe the 457F. For a couple of clients, we've been working with bonus 162 plans, which nobody seems to know about in the marketplace, but they're very unique ways to kind of get those golden handcuffs in place. And then finally, I think at the end of the day, we are looking to make sure that if you have an annual scorecard or a short-term incentive, that is a great way to do it. We had a question actually come in saying, what are the best exec comp and bonus plans for the 100 to 200 size? And wasn't sure if that was employees or dollars, but either way, an annual incentive is great. And one person said, how do I show employees if their year-end bonus is good, like they reached the max, or they left money on the table? Well, I got a couple of pictures here for you. Advance the slide here. This one, I don't expect you to read everything on here, but it's a picture of one of our scorecards. It's an annual scorecard. It's focusing people's on level of performance. So if we hit this threshold level, this target level, that maximum level, here's your payout. And the greens in there show, like, did we hit the middle of the road or the high end of the road? You can very clearly see if there was money left on the table or not. Yeah, there was more money you could have gotten, or did you just barely make threshold? Really telling people where it could be. And in the long-term incentive side, tying an organization to the value of the entity and saying, we're going to grant you units, and those shares are going to vest over time, and eventually you're going to have several tranches in play at one moment, that if you left, it'd be 3-4 tranches that you might have to say goodbye to. So those are just some far away. I don't expect you to read those, but these are what we're doing, and the visuals can really help an organization. So This is all about things in the cash comp bucket, but I'm going to transfer over to Carrie Arnold now, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about all the things that are happening in the world of flexibility and that space. So go ahead, Carrie.
Thanks, Rena. Yes, remote work is one of the big topics today, especially over the past couple of years as organizations had to react very quickly and become very flexible. It is probably the most desirable trait at a work environment. It will keep your best employees in place, or it will help you attract and retain the best as well. And we read stories or headlines all the time that employees or potential candidates, the real strong ones, will turn down a job offer if the position does not have that remote work capability. And what people are really looking for is flexibility. So organizations, they're finding that middle ground. They're looking to see which positions might be able to work remotely or in a hybrid mode. And we get to work with a lot of different clients across industries in our compensation consulting team. So for instance, we work with manufacturers or construction where the work has to be performed on site. We work with electric utilities, we work with water and sewer utilities as well, where employees have to live within a service area. So just depending on your business, you know, it's a unique model, but it's certainly a competitive advantage for when you can offer that ability to your staff to be flexible. What we saw is a couple interesting facts. Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, had a great report out. They measured from during the pandemic, probably about a year or a year and a half time, where they looked at folks with disabilities and how many were able to re-enter the workforce during these few years when companies really had no choice but to be flexible, and industries that traditionally were in person had to find a way to stay afloat and offer their employees that flexibility of remote work. So one of the human aspects we saw in all this is the number, the hundreds of thousands of people with disabilities able to re-enter the workforce because of those remote work opportunities. So that was kind of interesting. But with the remote work, and in our world, in our compensation consulting world, comes the question of how do I address pay for my employees and for my staff? And it's an interesting question. We solve these problems with clients all the time, and we come up with some creative approaches. But on the screen here, and as Rena mentioned earlier, when we were showing that slide with the graphs and the inflation rates, we see cost of labor as really two different things. When you look at cost of labor compared to cost of living, a lot of people are familiar with that. Cost of labor, again, as Rena explained, is really the supply and demand of salaries based on availability of skill sets. So across these different cities, let's take a look at Milwaukee up on top. 102% simply means how does this city compare to the US national average? Milwaukee is just slightly higher, 2% higher than the US national average, where a big city like Chicago is 11%. It's 111% of the US national average in terms of cost of salary. Out on the West Coast, we know with all the tech out there, San Jose is real high, 33% above. So certainly we're seeing so many different trends, and we read stories about employees on the West Coast really moving away from those very high cost of living areas to, you know, just because of the remote work capabilities. And big companies, big tech, we saw a lot of those headlines as well, come up with different approaches on how to address salaries. For example, the last one down here in Tallahassee, Florida, 90% of the US national average. So wouldn't that be an interesting place for a business to consider opening operations if they knew they had the labor and the workforce out there who could meet those needs? So we answer these questions all the time, and it really is a unique solution for each organization.
It's so interesting, Carrie. We had two questions come in. One is, what % of people are working from home? I don't know if you said that. I don't know if I missed it.
I do have an answer for that, absolutely. And I Googled it right before the call because we see a lot of data available now in trend surveys. These are data points that haven't been available in the past, but since these are things companies are doing, there's more surveys and information available for us. I saw a report recently that showed about 32% of workforce is working remotely. Of course, that depends on the industry. And I just Googled it quick before the call to see if that number was any different. And I saw about a 22%. So it really does depend, but I'd say probably anywhere is upwards as a quarter to maybe a third of the workforce is working remotely, and that's full-time, not in a hybrid, but full-time remote.
Thank you. And Pat had put through a question as well. She says, guys, where does it end? Isn't this crazy to just keep increasing? Will it slow down at any point in the near term? And I think this is, a lot of people are feeling frustration. We're trying to do everything for the employee, giving them flexible opportunities and merit and market. And I guess the big picture here is that we're going to go into a possible downturn. And I think the point is, unfortunately, we're not going to see a huge let up on this employee scarcity that we're going to be living. So the demographics, it's supply and demand. If we don't have enough people, it will keep the pressure on the wages because we'll have to pay to compete for the talent. And so I don't know. I feel this frustration from so many people, and I love there's like question marks and like I can feel the frustration in the question. And you cannot do it like 4% when there's 7% inflation. We started out with that. Is already saying, look, we're not going with the craziness in the market. Some did. I had somebody this morning saying we gave a 9% increase. We gave cost of living in the middle of last year, and we gave everybody 9%. Okay. But
it is, and it's so important to really try your best to retain your workforce. And you know, it's more than compensation, Rena. And as you said earlier as well, there's so many different components to why employees will come work for you and why they will stay. And I think with compensation programs, a really important component is how you communicate them and really explain to employees how we make pay decisions. And Kevin Paulson is going to talk us through that as far as pay transparency these days.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Rena. And this will be an interesting first question right here. It intrigues me from the standpoint of just what thoughts are going to be, but also I'll do a little weaving of some of the last comments around, you know, employee expectations and what feels like an obligation. But let's get right to the question. What stage are you at with this pay transparency? Can mean a lot of different things. We're going to give you kind of 4 different ways you can think about that. But as you perceive this phrase, pay transparency, in your organization, first opportunity limited to none. Second mentions you share need to know pay details with each employee, whatever that may exactly be, but you know, probably just a few specifics on that amount, possibly, you know, possibly might be a pay range. But the third one goes a little further, show pay ranges with both employee and supervisor. So they're going to see certainly the one pay range, but may see multiple pay ranges in some cases for those that are part of their staff. The last one there, communicate pay ranges in postings to staff and supervisors. So as you look at those 4, isn't necessarily one is always better than another, but just different options and approaches. Let's see where those of you that are part of the call kind of see pay transparency in your organizations right now. Now, I think this is also, once again, great takeaways for those of you to see what others are doing. This is right up there at the tops of the list of one of those topics of how transparent to be with pay. So what do we see? Not terribly surprising, although I would say this, the green bar being the 33%, so 1/3 of you sharing need to know pay details with each employee, so it's very specific to that employee. This likely, I would say, would have been 50, 60% if we'd have been doing this 2 to 3 years ago, if we'd asked the same question. So I think this is quite a change that we've seen in our group and with our clients and just in general, but still the smallest percentage into that one that would be, say, the kind of the tan box at the bottom of the page, communicate pay ranges and postings to staff and supervisors. Going to give you some thoughts around that. So as we head into the next slide, we want to talk a little bit about, well, what could that look like? What might it mean for you? What maybe would you want to do with pay ranges as you and pay transparency as you look into 2023? So first of all, want to say there are some cases. The top bullet mentions depends on local laws, and certainly that could be state laws. That could be some that are just a certain municipality sort of region that you're going to have some expectations that have to be followed. So look at those. That's foundational. No question about it. Now, I think if you're in one, you probably are at least somewhat too very aware of what those would be and by when. But certainly the states of Washington, California, Colorado, there are some out east. There's selected states, and they all have a little bit of different version of what they expect you to share, either at time of hire, maybe if the employee requests it. We're just going to have to stay tuned in, and we're going to have to watch, because this is likely not going backwards. This is not likely going to be less in the years to come. This is only going to get to be more information as well as more often. So this one we'll come back to, and we'll be talking about it as the years go by. But then the next part there, I want to kind of put this in the sense of the last maybe couple slides we talked about, and Rena was certainly hinting on this idea of, boy, just feeling like there's just a lot of overwhelming expectations that our clients are mentioning, and kind of obligations versus what we would say here is, what would be an opportunity for you? So an obligation versus an opportunity. Is there a benefit? Is there something that just by communicating more, maybe a little bit different type of information, this doesn't have to be necessarily a complete transformation, but just what else maybe would be valuable for an employee to know, that question marks go away, misunderstandings could at least be reduced, maybe some clarity around where they would fit bigger picture if they want to grow in their role. Think about that opportunity right there. If you have a little bit of transparency at times, could that make them feel better about things? There's not a one size fits all to this by any stretch, but maybe, again, an opportunity versus an obligation. The last one that I'd like to spend a little time on, I think if anything else, what could be that piece that you could utilize pay transparency to make a difference that wouldn't maybe potentially be all that disruptive, maybe just a few questions you might have addressed with current staff or those managers, and just being transparent in the hiring or the talent sort of attraction situations that you're presented with. You're trying to hire them on, you got a posting out on Indeed or wherever it might be. So you believe being more open about pay for attention or for attraction and retention could be valuable. So next slide mentions on there just some things, some kind of findings, some discussion points that are out there. Have these as takeaways that you can just refer back to. You might want to, when you're considering this, think about a few of these. Pretty powerful first bullet point there. So this particular organization asked different respondents, it said, would you, and as a job seeker, would you be more likely to apply to a job that lists a salary range? Pretty straightforward question, and so many of you on this call are likely struggling with this situation. Really give some thought to that first bullet of whether or not maybe some portion of that salary range makes sense. Maybe it's, we often suggest something like, maybe you post minimum to mid, unless you have a legal requirement that you have to post the full salary range. But maybe it's just a portion of where you truly intend to hire, so you have expectations set accordingly. But 85%, a huge proportion of the population is more interested when they kind of know what's the lay of the land before I apply to this. 68% saying, yeah, you know what, if I didn't know this though, I might look more towards the top of the range. So that's a caution. That's something we have to think about. That's why there has to be some thoughts going into what do you post of that salary range, whether it's the full, a portion of it, what portion of the compensation range you would report. And then the third reality that we also have to be thinking about, would others maybe have some expectations of our current staff? So not necessarily saying that would be bad. Wouldn't even say that have to be a negative, but maybe have to address some of those situations on equivalent pay. So some things to think about there. Last part that we would give you today is mentioning here on this IMA survey. So this is one, we just happen to feel close to this one. We know that we actually conducted this survey for all the manufacturers in the state of Illinois, the most, if not the largest state for manufacturing, right up there. So they have a lot of manufacturers. What are they doing to try to compete? They've got competitors that want their employees. The employees have options, all those sorts of things. So 200 respondents to this survey that we conducted for them on their behalf. And of those 200, what did they, as far as posting of the job range, how often did they do that for production positions versus professional positions versus leadership? So I think gave some very interesting insights, a few surprises, I'd say right off the bat. And maybe many of you on this call would think the same thing. Over half of those organizations, of those manufacturers, and you don't have to just be in manufacturing. You could be in construction, you could be in distribution, you could be in retail. So this can apply across the board. It just happens to be, we're talking about manufacturing in this particular case. So over half put that in there for their production roles, almost a quarter for the professional roles, and even, this is probably one of the surprises to me too, is there were 14% that said they did that for their leadership roles. So maybe senior managers, directors, VPs, that sort of thing. So takeaway, this is changing. This is something we want to pay attention to. It seems to be making an impact of getting employees' attention, and isn't that a positive in all of our cases? So
you had a couple of comments, Katie and Tiffany. Katie was saying you need a strategy within your company because it could be so complicated to follow these laws around pay transparency. So I really like that comment. And also, yeah, they're mandatory laws as well, to Tiffany's point, various locales requiring this. So whether you want to or not, it's interesting. I actually had a CEO get kind of angry today when we were talking about this. It's going to cause a whole bunch of uncomfortable conversations. Well, yeah, the system is kind of bad, then you might have some uncomfortable conversations. But I think
absolutely.
the important thing to remember is it's not, just the comp. And there is a comp question in here. I'm going to come back to that, Michelle. I'm going to go over to Carrie now. Carrie's going to talk to us about all the other things we have to think about.
Thanks, Rena and Kevin. Absolutely. And you see how all of these different components on pay transparency, how well you communicate your pay program, as far as economic factors like inflation, all of these things really impact pay. That's why I love the consulting world. We get to stay on top of all these trends and definitely solve problems and share all this great information with all of you. But as far as employee benefits, in your toolkit, besides pay, there's that broader total rewards package. And that's a term a lot of HR professionals are familiar with, but total rewards meaning not just compensation, but employee benefits, rewards programs, recognition, performance management, and that balance, that work-life balance are some of the big components. So these last few years especially have really caused employers, organizations to be very creative and to attract and retain the best talent. What a lot of them do, the very successful folks who really are able to attract and retain their top talent, they really dig in and think about and even ask employees what it is that they're looking for. And I'll share a quick story too. I work with a lot of utilities, and I was at a board meeting a few weeks ago, and the top executives have been with those organizations for decades, many years, the full career time. And they shared, that they're having trouble attracting and retaining the newer talent to come in. And they're really looking at their demographics, their age demographics, and they feel like they offer excellent benefits. They have a pension, they have so many traditional benefits, but today's workforce who are just entering the workforce, they're looking for different things. They have different needs, and my client recognized that. So what they're doing, they're actually surveying employees. So one tip I want to share with you all today is just ask. You can conduct a very simple survey before your open enrollment period, so maybe mid-year or so. Ask your employees what they value most. That's going to be an excellent retention strategy, and employees feel like they have a voice and that they are heard. So you'll see things like, from as far as wellness and mental health, we're looking at holistic benefits. Those have been very widely offered over the past few years. Financial education, Newport in a census, we are a financial firm. So financial education is definitely a benefit that we're seeing become very popular and very well utilized, as well as employee development and educational reimbursement. When a company can show that they are committed to developing an employee's skills, that means a lot. It's a very personal thing. So that is definitely a wonderful strategy, especially for your top talent.
We had a question that really, it's the employee development. Michelle is saying, can you talk about training supervisors and specifically on using the salary ranges?
Oh, that's a great.
Ranges being misunderstood, and what a great leadership training to help someone understand compensation and how it works.
It sure is, and that goes right back to communication. You can have your pay program, and you can have a lot of unwritten rules at your organization. Maybe that just only HR knows, or company owners, but it's so important to be open and training your first line supervisors, your hiring managers, on where would be an appropriate salary placement for a new hire. We call that range placement. And I worked in many industries. One of the best stories I could share is when I worked for a big health system. And when we would hire in a new nurse, we would take the time to look at how many years of experience, education, and specialty areas, and we would look at all the others, nurses on that floor, in that department, and make sure that we had a very careful and well thought out plan to come up with that salary offer. So sometimes there will be negotiations, but it is very important to take those steps.
Well, and I like what you're saying here. This next slide, Carrie, is, if I can make it move there you go, is about the whole package and educating your supervisors also, Michelle, about, you know, the base salary and how that works and how ranges work, but reminding everybody, you know what, your leadership style is going to help people stay here too. Because that goes in the talent development, talent recognition, performance management buckets. It's not just the pay. The pay and the benefits are key, but it's the whole package. That's what's going to help us attract, motivate, attract and retain, while making your employees feel motivated and engaged. So our last slide here is really about, you know, kind of a summary slide. What are all the different things going on? Comp and benefits, we're talking standard things, right? The base, maybe some incentive, maybe some good benefits like a health benefit or retirement benefit, but there's interesting things going on. We've got reliability bonuses. Just show up for the third day at work, a whole month maybe. This has been tough for production. Kevin talked about significant salary increases. We heard maybe that idea of, you know, what can I do to incent the right candidate even to come in so I can interview and I can give cash or sign-ons or retention bonuses. Maybe gas cards, you know, that's a cost of living piece where you could be shown as really answering the need by giving out gas cards. For benefits, great story. In Milwaukee, a CEO, she said, I made a $20,000 donation to the local zoo, got 5 zoo passes and a parking permit, and my people talked about that benefit. They could take their family to the zoo in the summer, more than any benefits dollars I had spent. So it was a great way to spend dollars. A family-owned company said, I want you to have dinner with the family on Fridays. Send me the receipt. I want your photo of your family having dinner together on the intranet. I'll pay for it. Milk Stork, Millie Giving. These are all interesting incentive benefit ideas that can add to the package for relatively low. Student loan repayment, Calm or Headspace app for mental health. We talked a little bit about bonus 162 plans. And then you've got in the work-life effectiveness, 4-day work week. I had somebody in the room today. Yep, she said went to it 5 years ago and everybody loves it in production. That flexibility or work from anywhere or summer hours, those kinds of things really, I mean, Carrie talked about how that's really making the difference. And then I saw yesterday on Axios, Gallup came out and said there are right now 18% of your people are actively disengaged. So that's that whole quiet quitting thing. Yeah, they're checked out. Thank you. The number one thing that article said you could do, monthly check-ins with your people, not even quarterly, monthly. 12 times you meet with them one-on-one can really make a difference. Coaching for your mid-level talent to get to senior level, talent attraction, and develop them, do talent cafe, train those supervisors on comp, not something they would get elsewhere. Do a raffle on social media for those when you're trying to get more people in for jobs. Give them special event gifts, recognize an adoption in the family. And one client today was saying, I do a milestone gift. I have 5 and 10, I have these special gifts I give, but at 15 and 20, you write me an email and you tell me what would be a dream that I can help make happen. And this is personalization. It's about, I listen to you, I think about the value you bring to this organization, and you want your kitchen redone, I'm gonna help you with a $20,000 help, or I'm gonna send you to Bali with your family. Whatever it might be, I'm gonna help make the dream come true, but make it personalized, because that can really be where you've listened to your employees and you've gotten back to them. We were hoping to have a little bit more time for questions, but I'm going to launch this last poll. HR professionals, please do let us know if you need SHRM or HRCI CE credits, continuing education credits. Go ahead and put that in. We don't need to share, but make sure you get it in. I'm going to leave it up for a few seconds here while we wrap up, because we want to be able to give you that certificate. So, it has been a real pleasure. I had one question come in that I want to read to you, and it was, how on earth do we handle minimum wage increases, crazy marketplace in a fair manner across a multifunctional organization that's across the United States while keeping our pay band alignment, employee retention, and expected margins? We can close the poll now and have our teammates come back on. Hopefully, we've been able to help you a little bit, Kevin, Carrie, and I today in answering that. That was a mouthful, that question, and it came in before the webinar. But we've been able to help you a little bit answer that question. We have a lot more. I know one person asked me, can you help me a little bit with the short-term design? Kim, I'll reach out to you. But thinking about the whole package, spending some time with us on these webinars, there's no one right answer. It's a complex problem we have today, but thanks for spending time with us, and we hope we've given you a nugget or two to take away. And Kevin, Carrie, any last comments?
I was just going to say, everyone, take a look at the handouts available. We have 2 for you, and one of them is a copy of our presentation today, but also download a copy of our CRB Compensation, Retirement, and Benefits Trends Reports, where we have a lot of commentary and charts and graphs on all the great things that we talked about today.
Great. Thank you all for your time. We hope to see you again. Answer the follow-up poll so we can bring you topics that interest you. Have a great day. Thank you for your time. Bye, everyone.